The Moon Mission Cover-Up, What NASA Hid in the Archives. The Forgotten File. It began with a misfiled box. NASA archivist Angela Ramirez had been combing through Apollo-era documents for months, part of a digitization effort funded by a private aerospace sponsor. Late one Tuesday night, she stumbled on a box that didn't belong. Stamped with a red, restricted, internal review only, the box had no entry in the manifest. It had sat unnoticed behind a shelf labeled Apollo 17 audio logs, but the contents were all wrong. Inside were hundreds of yellowing pages, Polaroids, and reels of 16mm film, none labeled. But one thing stood out immediately: a memo dated June 1969, weeks before the Apollo 11 launch. From Colonel Richard C. Donovan, DoD Liaison, Lunar Operations. To NASA Administrator Thomas Paine. Subject: Secondary Objective, Phase Echo. Upon contact with the lunar surface, Commander Armstrong will initiate a deviation per Echo protocol. Lunar module telemetry will be redirected via secure DoD uplink, and Phase Echo will commence. Angela stared at it, heart racing. She'd never seen references to Phase Echo in any Apollo documentation. She scanned the rest of the box. Several documents referenced unexplained directives, code phrases, and private transmissions between NASA and the Department of Defense. A second memo, marked Top Secret, Eyes Only, was addressed directly to Buzz Aldrin. Subject will initiate Phase Echo following surface egress. Audio recorders on public channels will remain offline for the duration of the deviation window. This action is considered a matter of national security under Executive Directive 42B. She copied everything onto a private flash drive and stashed the originals back in the box. She wasn't sure what she had found, but it didn't feel like it was meant to be found. The break in the broadcast. The Apollo 11 mission was famously smooth, almost too smooth. Public broadcast cut out for exactly 2 minutes when Armstrong and Aldrin exited the lunar module. NASA explained it as a signal dropout caused by a misaligned antenna. But the documents Angela found painted a different picture. An audio reel in the box was labeled simply Tranquility Base, Internal Chapter 14. She converted it and ran it through audio restoration software. Static, then a faint voice. "Okay, Houston, we're stepping away now. Moving to Site Echo. Copy, Eagle. Switching uplink. You're in the blind." The voice was unmistakably Armstrong's, but what followed was never part of the public record. "Buzz, over this ridge, 15 meters. Looks like, not natural. Definitely structured." Angela played it over and over. Structured. What had they seen? Further into the reel, the static cleared again. "They knew we'd come. This is old. Not ours. And not Russian." She froze. There had long been conspiracy theories, ranging from alien artifacts to secret Nazi bases, but never any credible evidence. This, however, was real NASA comms. She uploaded the audio to a secure server, encrypted the drive, and sent a discreet email to a former professor, Dr. Edwin Kessler, a lunar geologist with early Apollo ties. He responded within 2 hours. "Meet me in person. No digital records." The whistleblower. Dr. Kessler looked older than Angela remembered, thinner, haunted. They met at a diner near Goddard Space Flight Center. He hadn't touched his eggs. "I warned them not to go public," he said without preamble. Angela slid over a transcript of the audio. Kessler scanned it, then nodded slowly. They called it the anomaly. The first probe images in '66 hinted at something artificial in the Sea of Tranquility. That's why Apollo 11 was directed there. Not because it was safe, because of what they saw. Angela's head spun. Why hide it? Kessler leaned in. Because the implications were, and still are, terrifying. If someone or something had been on the moon before us, the geopolitical consequences would be unimaginable. Panic, arms races, religious upheaval. She told him about the documents, the Phase Echo orders. "That confirms it," he said. "They planned for it. The DoD was involved from the start. What Armstrong and Aldrin saw was real. But they were under strict orders: confirm, photograph, collect samples, then bury it." Angela asked the obvious question, why now? Why not tell the world? Kessler looked away. Because in 1972, during Apollo 17, we lost contact with a team near Copernicus crater. They were never supposed to go near the second structure. Angela's blood went cold. Second. He nodded. It wasn't alone. Evidence in shadows. Angela and Kessler returned to her lab, where she had begun enhancing the Polaroids from the mystery box. One image showed a stark silhouette on the horizon, tall, angular, and unmistakably artificial. It cast a long shadow, stretching eastward across the lunar regolith. Another showed Aldrin standing near what appeared to be a partially buried object with a smooth, reflective surface. Using software to map the sun angles and shadow lengths, Angela estimated the structure's height, nearly 40 feet. Definitely not a natural formation. Kessler pointed to one photo. See the arc in the soil? That's impact dispersion. But the object didn't impact, it's upright. Placed there. There was more. A sealed folder labeled Lunar Sample Echo, Isotope Variants, contained analysis reports that made no geological sense. The samples had isotopic signatures inconsistent with lunar basalt, high in iridium and yttrium, elements common in meteorites but found here in unusual ratios. Angela compared the data with modern lunar findings. This doesn't match anything we've seen from other Apollo samples. Kessler handed her one final memo. Subject: Containment of Lunar Anomalous Artifacts, Echo 3 Directive. All evidence pertaining to non-terrestrial construct is to be classified under Project Echo. Any personnel with knowledge beyond Tier 2 will undergo memory review and reassignment. No disclosure is authorized. Angela sat back. They erased it from history. Worse, Kessler said. They covered it with lies. Every Apollo mission afterward had hidden objectives. By Apollo 17, the astronauts weren't explorers, they were cleaners. The mission was to remove or bury the evidence. The other side of the moon. Digging deeper into NASA's declassified archives, Angela found strange inconsistencies. Several Apollo surface photos were edited, objects airbrushed out, image resolutions lowered. Metadata suggested the originals were far higher quality. And then there were the missing minutes. NASA had long denied that any transmission time had been cut, but Angela unearthed logs from a ground station in Australia, Parkes Observatory, that had recorded a continuous feed during the Apollo 11 moonwalk. The tape had never been played publicly. She requested access under a research grant alias. A week later, a courier delivered a battered reel-to-reel tape marked Parkes Live Feed, July 1969. Using restored playback equipment, Angela heard what no one had heard in over 50 years. Armstrong, we're approaching the ridge. I'm seeing multiple depressions. Crater patterns inconsistent. Looks placed. Aldrin, this isn't random. These align. Like a layout. A design. Armstrong, Buzz, you're seeing this, right? These symbols. Etched. Like writing. Not English. Not any language I know. Angela stared at the waveform, watching her entire worldview collapse. The moon wasn't just a rock. It had been visited before. And someone had gone to great lengths to make sure the rest of us never found out. Angela's hands trembled as the audio continued. Every second confirmed what the hidden documents had suggested. The moon landing had been more than a symbolic Cold War victory. It had been a mission of retrieval, surveillance, and possibly containment. She slowed the tape at one particular section where the static spiked and Aldrin's voice turned urgent. Kneel. Movement. 10 o'clock. Edge of the ridge. It's shifting. Then silence. A long, dead stretch of hiss and crackle. And then Armstrong, clearly trying to maintain composure. We're okay, Houston. Minor visibility issue. Continuing survey. A clean, practiced lie. This wasn't just about what they found, it was about what found them. Angela sat in stunned silence. The implications were seismic. For decades, humanity had revered Apollo 11 as the pinnacle of human achievement. But if this was true, if there was a pre-existing structure on the moon, and possibly something more, then the real history of the mission had been erased before it had even begun to be written. Kessler watched her carefully. You understand now why they buried it. She nodded. But why keep the records at all? Because even secrets decay, Kessler said. The people who orchestrated the cover-up assumed control would pass to successors. That someone would pick up the torch, just in case whatever they found ever reactivated. Angela looked back at the images. The angular object. The symbols. The altered isotopic data. So they kept the files as a failsafe. Kessler said, or a warning. Angela's thoughts reeled. If this was true, then the entire Apollo program, every mission, every public broadcast, was a layer of theater wrapped around a darker truth. Not only had NASA discovered something on the moon, but the Department of Defense had actively suppressed it. And now, through negligence or bureaucratic oversight, that truth was leaking out. She needed more. Through her NASA clearance, Angela accessed an old internal routing system for lunar data codenamed Aegis. Most records were gutted, links redirected to dummy files. But deep within a forgotten node tied to Apollo 12's geology mission, she found a corrupted archive labeled Echo 3_relay. It took hours, but she restored part of a transcript. It was a voice log, one of the astronauts, possibly Pete Conrad, speaking to Houston during what should have been a routine sample collection. Found another shard, similar composition. Reflectivity 90% plus. Doesn't register on mass scan. It's vibrating. Constant frequency, 3 kHz. Houston, DoD channel, Echo 3, do not engage. Secure in isolation tube and proceed to relay point. Repeat. Do not attempt to examine further. Conrad or Bean. It's reacting to proximity. Static charge building. Like it's alive. Angela reread the last line over and over. The implications gnawed at her. The object wasn't just old. It was functioning. Still powered. Possibly intelligent. She looked over at Kessler. You said they sent people back to clean up. Not just clean up, he said grimly. Neutralize. Angela didn't sleep that night. She pulled every favor she could, reaching out to archivists, ex-NASA engineers, even a retired telemetry specialist who had worked on the Deep Space Network. Everyone gave her the same wary look when she asked about anomalies or lost data. But one man responded differently. Vincent Shaw had been a systems analyst at Goldstone during Apollo 17. Now in his 80s, he lived in a quiet retirement community in Nevada. Over a scrambled call line, he confirmed something that chilled Angela to the bone. There was a blackout during 17. Not public. Not just radio silence. Everything went down. 6 minutes. Angela asked, what happened during those 6 minutes? Shaw exhaled. We lost them. Not like, no signal. Like the moon didn't exist. Telemetry vanished. Radar, gone. Visual feed from the module, cut to black. Angela could barely speak. What did they report afterward? Nothing. They came back shaken. Like they'd seen something they couldn't process. One of them, Schmidt, he never spoke about it again. Just told us, don't go back there. Angela asked one final question. Was there ever a plan to return? After Apollo? Shaw hesitated. There was something called Artemis Alpha, unmanned mission, supposed to drop a seismic payload. But it was cancelled before launch. Some of us think it wasn't a science package. It was a weapon. Angela logged off and immediately began piecing together timelines. The Apollo program ended in 1972. The Artemis revival wasn't publicly announced until decades later. But if Artemis Alpha had been an abandoned attempt to bomb the site, what had they been trying to destroy? The final piece came from a cache of data stored on microfiche, forgotten in the basement of the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. She flew there personally. The card index showed only one entry marked, Classified, Echo Deep Survey. It was misfiled under Geological Expeditions, Antarctica. The document was a scan of a typed letter addressed to the President, dated 1973. The signature was unmistakable, Dr. Wernher von Braun. Mr. President, after careful review of the Apollo 17 telemetry logs and material samples, it is my professional recommendation that no further manned missions be attempted near Copernicus crater. The readings are unstable. The material appears responsive to EM fluctuations. There is a pattern to its resonance, repeating every 73 hours. It may not be of natural origin. We do not yet understand what has been unearthed. Respectfully, Dr. Wernher von Braun. Angela stared at the words. Responsive. Resonance. Pattern. This wasn't a dead structure. It was something far worse. Something sleeping. And humanity had kicked it. In the following days, Angela tried to reach Kessler again, but his phone was disconnected. When she called his last known associate, she was told he'd checked into a hospital 2 days earlier. Massive heart attack. He died that morning. She checked the box that had started it all. It was gone. Not in the lab, not in the archives. The lock on her office had been changed. Angela didn't go back to work. She went public. From an anonymous burner account, she released the images, audio logs, documents, and coordinates. Within hours, they spread like wildfire across dark web forums and fringe science sites. The mainstream media hesitated, but then came the denials, from NASA, the Air Force, even NORAD. And with every official refutation, interest only grew. People demanded to know what was really on the moon. A week later, a leak from inside the European Space Agency confirmed that a lunar orbiter, SMART 1, had recorded anomalous thermal emissions near the Apollo 17 site in 2006 but was ordered to destroy the data. Now it was too late to hide. Civilian astronomers began pointing high-power telescopes toward Copernicus crater. A few reported irregularities, brief glints, shifting shadows. One even claimed to have caught a flicker of movement. Then came the incident. A small, private Japanese lander, Hikaru 7, was launched on a commercial trajectory toward Mare Tranquillitatis, scheduled to land near the Apollo 11 site. Its telemetry was public. 15 minutes after touchdown, the signal was lost. But not before one image was transmitted. It showed a trench, long, straight, freshly carved into the dust. And at the edge of the frame, half buried in lunar soil, was a shape, smooth, black, gleaming. Like a shard of glass or obsidian, pulsing faintly in the reflected sunlight. Angela didn't need a second opinion. The anomaly wasn't dormant anymore. It had noticed us. Angela went dark. After the Hikaru 7 transmission went public, strange things began happening. Her home was broken into, nothing stolen, but everything searched. Her backup drives were wiped. Her phone stopped receiving calls. She abandoned her apartment and took refuge with a contact in Vancouver, someone she trusted from her early days at JPL. Every time she opened a browser, it glitched. Someone was watching. But it was already out of NASA's hands. The story had taken on a life of its own. Analysts, engineers, linguists, even a few retired spooks were dissecting every frame, every transcript. Reddit threads turned into investigations. Amateurs began analyzing telescope feeds in real time. Angela uploaded one final file to a secure, crowdsourced archive. To whoever finds this, I don't know how much time I have left. But you need to understand, this wasn't about aliens. It was about control. They found something they couldn't explain, and instead of telling us, they tried to lock it away. But it's awake now. And it remembers us. Then she vanished. Theories exploded across the internet. The object was a probe. A beacon. A prison. A weapon. A seed. Some claimed it emitted a low-frequency hum now detectable from Earth-based observatories. Others insisted its alignment with certain lunar craters matched ancient Sumerian star maps. But amidst the chaos, one fact remained undeniable. Something on the moon was never meant to be found. And now it had been. 2 months later, a new mission was announced by the U.S. Space Force in partnership with SpaceX. Publicly, it was a joint lunar survey to identify resource zones for future colonization. Privately, it was codenamed Project Sentinel. What few knew was that the astronauts selected had no prior spaceflight experience. They were ex-special forces, nuclear engineers, cryptographers. A recovery team. They weren't going to explore. They were going to secure. Onboard equipment included seismic detonators, electromagnetic nullifiers, and a directed energy payload. Not a single telescope on Earth was able to track their lander descent. The live stream from orbit cut out at 18,000 feet. For 4 days, there was silence. Then, on the 5th day, the lunar surface camera came back online. A single image was broadcast. A burned-out crater, glassed over. No structures. No bodies. Just a strange symmetrical spiral carved into the soil. Too precise to be natural, too massive to be man-made. It pulsed once in infrared. And then the feed went dark again. NASA released a single statement. Project Sentinel has concluded. There is no threat. The moon remains a stable environment for future exploration. We thank our partners for their commitment to the advancement of science. But no one believed them. Especially not Angela. She was already far from the continent, somewhere high in the Andes, watching the stars. She had made peace with being a ghost. The truth was out. People were awake. That was enough. But sometimes, in the dead of night, she'd stare up at the moon and feel something staring back. Not malevolent. Not benevolent. Just aware. It had been watching us long before Apollo. Before Sputnik. Before fire and language. And now that we had touched its prison, now that we had tried to break it, it would watch us closer. And wait. Because whatever it was, it wasn't finished. And neither were we.